Depressions and their treatments. First, what is depression? And what is it not? Depression is a disease of the brain. Follow my logic. The brain is part of the body. So when the brain has a disease, the body has a disease. The body is physical. The brain is part of the body, therefore a depression is a physical disease as well as a mental one. Now, because it's a physical disease, it cannot be treated by willpower alone. Okay? So maybe changing your mental outlook could make a difference if the problem was solely mental. It isn't. We'll talk later about whether mental outlook can help at all. This is commonly said, but it's not commonly understood. The idea that you're weak in some way. You have a weak character that needs to be developed, or you're not showing willpower. These are incorrect. I hope that the explanation that's forthcoming will show you why. So exactly what is the disease of the brain? Now, without naming specific parts of the brain or using a lot of medical terminology, which is beyond my expertise in any case, it's about hypoactivity or underactivity in some parts of the brain, overactivity in some parts of the brain, or both. They can both occur at the same time. I use the word depressions. Okay, I put it with an S because there are several types. They're very different. Just a few of the differences. Okay. Some people overeat. Some people don't want to eat at all. Some people sleep more than normal. Some people sleep less or can't sleep at all. Some people become hyperactive to the point where they're agitated, can't sit still, running their hands through their hair, fidgeting, things like that. It could involve anxiety, which I'm calling caring too much. Okay, that is to say that if things don't work out the way I want, if things are not as I want, I treat it as a disaster. Okay, that's what I call caring too much. Or it can be apathy. I don't care at all. So anxiety would be I absolutely must get that job, or else it will be a disaster, which will just confirm my negative view of the world. Apathy would be I'm not even going to bother to apply for that job and don't care if I get it. Again, depression. They're different depressions. Okay, but so why do all these depressions all share the same root word? Well, I would say that it's because they do all have common characteristics. So we're talking about long-term changes. We're not talking about just being in a bad mood for a little while. We're talking about something that's long-term and you don't want it. That is to say, it's a negative, unpleasant experience in mood and or behavior. Here I'm focused on depression. I'm not addressing bipolar depression, at least not the first type. Because it's different. So I'm focusing on depressions, or at least the depression stage of bipolar. Okay, you're talking about undesired mood changes in mood and also in your behavior. Now, the fact that it affects your behavior does not mean necessarily that you lose all ability for purposeful action. Okay, again, on purpose means that you're doing something in order to get a certain outcome. You're making a choice in order to get a certain outcome, as opposed to just action that just occurs naturally, like, again, fidgeting in the case of an agitated depression. So the idea that this person is not exercising enough willpower, people with depression tend to exercise much greater willpower because they have to summon greater will, spend more energy to do the same things that healthier people do. Now, when you spend more energy, if you're in good health, the best of health, you still get tired. But remember, the person with depression is spending more energy to do the same things. So this means that a profound fatigue comes about just from normal daily activities, which is different from, say, a person in better health working 16-hour days for a week, and eventually they'll become very tired. For a person with severe depression, it might only take a few hours of work, a few times a week to cause that profound fatigue. Or the fatigue could just be there and the person could not even be able to go to work. Now, in extreme cases, yes, you can lose all your will to do anything that has a purpose. And of course, you can lose your will to live. So here are some treatments. It doesn't mean that every depression requires the same set of treatments. Okay, however, medication, just as important as if you had diabetes or something like that, if you have a certain type of depression. Therapy is, I'm talking about sitting in session talking to a therapist. Behavioral activation is kind of a second component that some therapists, like for example, Aaron Beck, designed to get a person with depression to see not necessarily that they have to get up and do normal activities, but just basically, can you do anything? Are you willing to do anything small? And sort of get you started. They're both forms of therapy. Exercise, if you can get yourself to do it, highly effective in stimulating the brain. In some cases, direct stimulation of the brain. You might have heard of electroconvulsive. You literally put electrodes or whatever on a person's head and you zap their brain. All right. This is only done for cases that resist the initial treatments. Now, why is it that depression is persistent? It's not just because of natural factors. For one thing, people with depression in general do not get the same treatment from loved ones and from society at large. So people might be aware that they have depression, but they generally do not send cards, flowers, gift cards, offer to come and cook them dinner, send food and things like that. Typically, people with depression don't receive this kind of treatment. So yes, it's noted that people with depression isolate themselves and that perhaps that makes depression worse. And that might be true in some cases, but why would you go out and interact with people who are treating you in such a way as that they're either not aware that you're in pain and don't respond when you try to tell them, or they say things that make it worse? Why would you want to go and spend time with people when they're doing that? At least if you isolate yourself, you don't have to hear those aggravating things. Again, it's not because it's not willful on the part of the people. They think they're trying to help, or they don't understand that they even need to. Now, this is because, again, people don't treat it as a serious disease. Okay, even mental health professionals, in many cases, they just don't treat it the same way they would if a disease that is regarded as physical. And this one is very important. People with depression get pressure, including from themselves, to do the same things as people who are in good health, to perform to the same degree. So I talked about obstacles to belief. What are some things that can help? Now, until now, I've been very pessimistic about depression. So here's some positive news. They can get much better. Even people with severe depressions can often get much better. But here's sort of a difficult concept. But if you're able to really take it on board, it can really help alleviate people's pain. So no, you cannot make the depression better, at least directly or at least not immediately. But you can do things that make it worse. And you probably do things that make it worse. And now, why is this good news? Because you can say what attitudes and beliefs and things you're doing that are making it worse. And then say, okay, well, what would be the opposite of these? Some things are under your control, at least in many cases of depression. So let's take a person named Michael. So he has a belief, and therefore he pressures himself to get done the same things just as quickly, with the same perfection, no matter how sick he is. With what other disease or injury is this expectation held? Well, there actually are some. Chronic headache sufferers know about this. So there are some. But I'm just saying that people with depression are among a selection of diseases in which people are expected and expect themselves to do the same quality of work as quickly, even if they're very sick. Now, I don't care how tough you are. You could be the toughest Marine, for example, but you're not invincible. And when you get very sick, or when you get injured on the battlefield or whatever, you're taken care of. Okay, if possible, they remove you from where you are. You go and they put you in a bed. They treat you for it. Okay, and so it has nothing to do with being tough. You're sick. That means you're excused, at least to a degree. So now he believed that he could do all these things. He believed that he could be like a superhero. But now he looks at it, perhaps with the help of a therapist, and says, no, your illness is going to make you go slower. You're going to have more mistakes, more setbacks, more blunders. Okay, this is going to suggest that you should work for shorter time frames. Take more breaks and longer ones. Set smaller goals. Again, expect less of yourself in a given period of time. I say intermediate goals. It doesn't mean you can't have big hopes and dreams. Okay, and then more help from other people. But again, they have to understand what you're going through to be able to help. So let's say that Michael does this. He develops a new belief that actually, no, he does not any longer expect himself to perform to the same perfection in the same time frame as a person in good health. So now he expects himself to take longer. All right. He expects himself to have to rest. This could include a complete shutdown. He might have to lie in bed or just sit there staring off into space. But it will pass. So now he accepts the fact that he's going to take longer, his goals are going to be delayed, and it's going to be more difficult to do. So now he's looking at his delayed and difficult accomplishments. And because he's performing up to what he expects, that means it's good enough. He sees it as good enough. Maybe not great, maybe not perfect, but good enough. So people tend to perceive things that are good enough as worth doing. Before he thought, well, if I can't actually end up doing it to perfection, that means it wasn't worth trying. Now he sees, well, you couldn't do it to perfection. You expect to make mistakes and go slow. Now, again, because he now sees his achievements as good enough, because he didn't make his depression worse with faulty beliefs, he's not making his depression worse. It's not necessarily going to alleviate it right away, but he's not making it worse. Now, depression tends to go through natural cycles. The person experiences some changes in moods. It has a natural cycle. When you're aggravating the depression with things like trying to rush through work, trying to do too much, or, poor diet, exercise, and a lack of exercise, a number of things, you're making matters worse. So if you don't make matters worse and leave the depression where it is, the natural cycle comes along and it can do its job. It can bring up your mood at times. This is not forced. It's automatic. You make a change in behavior that does not necessarily alleviate your depression. But because it doesn't make it worse, okay, you're not putting the pressure downward on your mood. You're letting it naturally float upward. That phase and the relief does not take effort. Therefore, it doesn't cause the same fatigue, and the person really can begin to get some relief and feel much lighter. So he sees he can do some things, but he cannot. Okay, I'm calling this a can't-do attitude. Okay? President Obama said, yes, we can. Well, sometimes the correct response is no, we can't. We can't do everything. Again, we're saying can't do as many things, okay, at the same speed, to the same quality, and with the same independence from others. Again, he is very sick. Please try to take this seriously and understand what very sick means. Picture a heart patient recovering from surgery, if it helps you. The patient has just had bypass surgery, in great pain, extremely tired. Does that mean he can never do anything? Sure he can. But he's going to get out of bed, he's going to begin to walk very slowly, he's going to get physical therapy. And he might return to regular activities, he might even get all the way better. But no, he cannot return to regular functioning immediately, okay, and should not try to, okay? So sometimes the correct response to a person suffering from depression, oh, just try. Sometimes no, please do not try. Please do not try. Rest. Okay, lie down. If you shut down, shut down. Let yourself get a little bit into somewhat better mood, and then you can try to do small things, little itty-bitty things. If it makes you feel even a little bit better to do them, then it'll be worthwhile and you won't be putting all this pressure on yourself. So thank you for listening.